Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with our latest stories.
For years, Claire had lived in Maple Hollow, a picture-perfect town where nothing ever truly changed. The streets were quiet, the routines predictable, and everyone knew your name, but not your heart. At 47, Claire often found herself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, haunted by a restlessness she couldn't explain. It wasn't loneliness exactly, it was something deeper. Like her soul was pacing behind invisible bars. The silence in her house was no longer comforting. It had turned heavy like fog that never lifted. Her days moved in muted rhythm, grocery runs, wanting more than the polite conversations and empty courtesies that filled her life. She didn't know what she was waiting for, only that something needed to shift. And when the air grew thick one Friday evening, and the clouds rolled in low and angry, Claire felt it in her bones. Something was coming. Not just a storm, but a reckoning. What she didn't realize was that within that night's darkness, her carefully ordered world was about to be beautifully, irreversibly undone. The storm came in sudden bursts, violent, howling, unapologetic. Claire had just settled into her usual Friday night ritual. A cup of chamomile tea, her mother's old quilt, and a black and white film she'd watched too many times to count. Then, with a flicker and a pop, the power went out, plunging her world into a velvety silence pierced only by the rain's crescendo. As she fumbled for candles, thunder rolled across the sky like an omen. And then came the knock. Sharp. Urgent. Unmistakably human. Her heart stuttered. Who in their right mind would be out in this weather? With cautious steps, she approached the door and peeked through the window. There, drenched and disheveled, stood James, the quiet, solitary man who lived a few houses down. Claire barely knew him beyond the occasional wave or awkward hello. But tonight, he wasn't just a neighbor. He was a figure carved from stormlight and vulnerability. His soaked shirt clung to him, his hair dripping, his expression equal parts apology and desperation. "I'm so sorry," he said over the howling wind. "A tree's blocked my driveway, my power's out, and my phone's dead. I didn't know where else to go." Without hesitation, Claire opened the door wider. "Come in," she said. "You'll catch your death out there." What she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that this simple act, this one spontaneous moment of shelter, would shatter the wall around her heart and set into motion a night neither would ever forget. The power stayed out, but something else had sparked, a quiet, flickering current between them that had nothing to do with the storm outside. In the soft glow of candlelight, Claire handed James a warm towel and brewed what was left of the tea she'd prepared before the outage. He sat cautiously on the edge of her couch, his fingers wrapped around the cup, still shivering slightly. Their conversation began with the obvious. The weather, the fallen tree, how unprepared they both felt. But soon, it slipped into something deeper. James spoke of Isabel, his late wife, with a reverence that pierced the silence. 5 years gone, he said, but her absence still shaped every corner of his life. Claire, surprised by her own ease, confessed the hollow ache of a marriage that ended not in fire but in slow indifference. "Loneliness has a strange way of disguising itself," she said quietly, staring into the swirling dark of her tea. "Sometimes it feels like peace, until it doesn't." James nodded, his eyes soft, understanding. "It's the silence that's hardest," he murmured. Outside, the rain beat steadily, a gentle rhythm against the windows, as if nature itself were eavesdropping. In that moment, neither of them felt alone. Something intangible was shifting, subtle but powerful. A warmth bloomed in the quiet between them, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly, but rather sneaks in like the scent of rain-soaked earth. Claire felt it then. This wasn't just surviving a storm. It was the beginning of something she hadn't dared to hope for. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world scrubbed clean but broken in places, branches littering lawns, debris scattered like confetti from the chaos. Yet inside Claire's home, the air was still charged, thick with something unspoken. James had left at first light, offering a quiet thank you and a fleeting smile that lingered longer than it should have. As she watched him disappear down her walkway, a strange pang tugged at her chest, an ache of absence where only hours ago there had been connection. The house felt colder without him, the silence no longer familiar but hollow. She poured herself a fresh cup of coffee, but even that ritual felt altered, as if her world had subtly tilted overnight. Images of James kept replaying in her mind. The way his voice softened when he spoke of Isabel, how his hands trembled slightly around the warm mug, and the way his gaze, intense yet kind, had met hers like a question she hadn't been asked in years. She caught herself smiling into the steam of her coffee, then quickly shook it off, embarrassed by her own giddiness. Get a grip, she told herself. But the truth was undeniable. Something had shifted. Not just outside in the aftermath of the storm, but within her. The emotional stillness she had carried for years had been stirred, disturbed by the presence of someone who, without even meaning to, had reminded her what it felt like to be seen. And that realization made her heart race in a way she hadn't felt in a very long time. Later that afternoon, as Claire gathered fallen branches from her yard, the sound of approaching footsteps stirred something in her. She looked up to see James walking slowly toward her, sleeves rolled up, a quiet determination in his stride. "Looks like you've got your hands full," he called, offering a sheepish smile. She returned it instinctively, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Not as bad as your place, I'm guessing?" His sigh confirmed it. Damage to his fence, a crushed garden bed, and a tree that now slept awkwardly across his driveway. Without thinking, Claire offered to help. The words came easily, surprising even her. 2 pairs of hands, after all, could do more than one. At first, James hesitated, clearly reluctant to impose, but something in Claire's tone, firm, playful, undeniably kind, made him nod in quiet agreement. They spent hours side by side, hauling debris, laughing at the stubborn roots, and pausing occasionally to rest and talk. Beneath the sun's gentle warmth, the bond between them deepened. Not forged in grand gestures but in sweat, shared effort, and stolen glances. Claire found herself opening up in ways she hadn't in years, telling stories that had lived only in memory, her voice lighter, her laughter more genuine. James, too, seemed transformed. His grief still present but softer, reshaped by presence and possibility. As the sky shifted toward late afternoon and they leaned against his porch sipping lemonade, Claire realized something. What began as disaster relief had become something far more restorative, for them both. The night of their first official date arrived like a drumbeat in Claire's chest, anxious, electric, and full of possibilities. She stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric of her soft blue dress, her heart racing in a way it hadn't in years. There was a glow in her cheeks, a quiet excitement that reminded her of a younger self she thought long buried. When James arrived, dressed in a crisp navy shirt and holding a single rose, Claire felt her breath catch. His eyes held a nervous warmth, and that alone was enough to soften the last of her hesitation. The restaurant they chose was small, tucked between a bookstore and a florist downtown, filled with candlelight and murmurs of quiet conversations. They sat in a corner booth, the soft clink of silverware, and jazz playing gently in the background. Conversation came easily at first, light anecdotes, shared smiles. But as the evening unfolded, James's voice grew quiet, his expression more contemplative. He spoke of Isabel, the ache of losing her, the way love had both shaped and broken him. Claire listened, her hand gently finding his across the table. She, too, shared the quiet grief of her dissolved marriage, the slow erosion of intimacy. Their stories weren't dramatic, they were deeply human, full of cracks and quiet longing. And somehow, in those confessions they found connection. As they left the restaurant, walking beneath the soft glow of the street lamps, Claire realized the most extraordinary thing. Vulnerability had never felt so safe. Later that week, as a gentle rain tapped against the window panes, James invited Claire over for dinner. The evening was cozy, unpretentious. Homemade pasta, soft jazz, and flickering candlelight. After they finished eating, James grew quiet, his eyes reflective as he reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn photograph. "This was Isabel," he said softly, handing it to Claire. The image showed a woman with a radiant smile and kind eyes, a beauty that radiated warmth. Claire held the photo gently, feeling the weight of its meaning. "She was lovely," she whispered, touched by the reverence in his voice. James nodded, emotion catching in his throat. "I've carried this every day since she passed. But tonight feels different. Tonight feels like the first time I'm ready to stop clinging to the past and start making space for the present. Claire blinked back tears, moved by the quiet vulnerability of his gesture. She placed the photo delicately back into his hands and reached for him. I want to honor what you had and be part of what comes next, she said with quiet strength. James's eyes shimmered as he held her hand tightly. Meeting you didn't erase the past, Claire. It reminded me I still have a future. That moment, simple yet profound, stitched something back together inside them both. In letting go, James was opening his heart again, and Claire, for the first time in years, felt the beautiful, terrifying thrill of being chosen, not as a replacement, but as someone truly seen. The weekend getaway came like a breath of fresh air, literally and emotionally. Nestled in the quiet mountains, the cabin overlooked a crystalline lake and was surrounded by pine trees that swayed like sentinels in the breeze. Claire felt the tension of everyday life fall away the moment they arrived, her lungs drinking in the scent of pine and wood smoke. She and James spent their days hiking sun-dappled trails, cooking simple meals, and laughing over forgotten songs playing softly from an old radio. But as evening fell on their final night, a different kind of stillness took hold. Curled up beneath a quilt by the fireplace, the shadows dancing across the walls, Claire felt a shift in the air. James sat beside her, his gaze serious, thoughtful. This weekend, he began, voice low, has reminded me of everything I thought I'd lost: laughter, closeness, even the quiet joy of simply being with someone who understands. Claire's heart ached with recognition. She'd felt it too. But the closeness also brought a tremor of fear. Could this be real? Could love bloom again after such profound loss? I've been scared, she admitted softly. Scared of losing myself again. Of getting too close only to watch it fade. James reached for her hand, his touch grounding. So have I, he said. But this you feels worth the risk. In that quiet cabin, surrounded by crackling fire and a million unseen stars, they chose not just each other, but the courage to believe in love's second coming. And in that choice, something beautiful was born. The fire cast a soft, golden glow across the room as Claire nestled deeper into the warmth of the cabin. Heart still fluttering from the words James had just spoken, he turned to her, eyes vulnerable, searching, and slowly reached into his coat pocket. Her breath caught as he revealed a small velvet box, his fingers trembling slightly as he held it between them. Claire, he began, voice thick with emotion. Life brought us together in the most unexpected way. Through wind and rain, through grief and silence, I found you. And I don't want to let go. With care. He opened the box, revealing a delicate ring that sparkled like a promise in the firelight. Will you marry me? Time seemed to still. Claire's throat tightened, tears gathering in her eyes as waves of disbelief, gratitude, and overwhelming joy washed over her. She nodded, unable to form words, then finally whispered, Yes. Yes, James. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands warm and sure, and then pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was gentle and full of meaning, sealing not just a proposal, but the journey they had walked, through heartbreak and healing, through uncertainty and hope. The fire crackled beside them as they held each other, wrapped in a moment that felt both ordinary and divine. Outside, snow began to fall softly, as if the world itself was blessing their union. In that quiet, flickering space, they stepped into something sacred. A love found not despite the storms, but because of them. The weeks that followed unfolded like a dream written in sunlight and laughter. Claire and James moved through their days with a kind of gentle rhythm, a harmony forged not through fantasy, but through shared effort, quiet understanding, and the thrill of rediscovered companionship. Morning coffees became rituals, walks through the town felt like small adventures, and each glance, each touch, deepened the emotional bond that had taken root during the storm. One afternoon, as they sat on Claire's porch watching the golden leaves drift lazily from the trees, James turned to her, his voice soft with wonder. It still amazes me how all of this began with a fallen tree and a flicker of candlelight. Claire smiled, her hand wrapped in his. It wasn't just the storm, James. It was everything we were both too afraid to say until life made us stop and listen. As if on cue, a low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, a gentle reminder of the night that changed everything. James reached into his wallet, not for the photograph of Isabel this time, but to pull out a small note, one he had written to himself after her passing, a promise to never love again. He looked at Claire, folded the note, and set it gently into the flames of the porch fire pit. "I was wrong," he said simply. Claire's eyes shimmered. As the ashes rose and vanished into the breeze, so did the last shadows of their pasts. What remained was only forward, and love brave and beautifully earned. In today's fast-paced, digitally disconnected world, it's easy to retreat into emotional isolation, convincing ourselves that safety lies in solitude. But just like Claire and James, we often need a moment of disruption, a storm, to remind us of our capacity for connection. Don't wait for perfect timing to open your heart. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the gateway to genuine relationships. Be present, be brave, and allow others in, even when it feels uncertain. Sometimes the most beautiful chapters of your life begin not with grand plans, but with a knock on the door and the courage to say, "Come in."